Rain hammered against the reinforced windows of the Galactic Combat Institute like bullets from a war zone. The storm on Tyrion 7 had been raging for 3 days now, turning the moon's surface into a churning sea of mud and lightning. Alex Chen pressed his face against the glass and watched the purple lightning dance across the sky, while other students complained about the weather affecting their training schedules. Inside the Academy's main hall, the atmosphere crackled with a different kind of energy. 500 of the galaxy's deadliest predators filled the vast space, each one representing their species' finest warriors. The reptilian hunters from Scales Prime stretched their powerful limbs, their emerald scales catching the artificial light as razor-sharp claws extended and retracted in practiced motions. Their yellow eyes tracked every movement in the room with the cold precision of born killers near the combat simulators. A pack of feline warriors from the Whisper Worlds moved with liquid grace. Their silver fur rippled over muscles that could propel them 30 feet in a single bound, while their enhanced hearing picked up conversations from across the enormous hall. One of them, a female with distinctive black stripes, demonstrated her species' famous silent strike to a group of admirers. Her paws made no sound as she leaped onto a training dummy and delivered what would have been a killing blow. The Bear Clan from Heavy World dominated their section of the hall, simply by existing. Each warrior stood over 8 feet tall with bone density that could crack steel. Their thick brown fur-covered bodies that could survive in the vacuum of space for short periods. The youngest among them casually lifted training, weights that would crush most other species. Treating 1,000-pound bars like toys, Alex pulled his notebook from his jacket pocket and began sketching the scene before him. Other students had noticed the human's habit of constantly writing, but none understood what he found so fascinating about everyday academy life. The reptilian closest to him hissed softly in curiosity, wondering if humans possessed some form of written combat magic. "First-day jitters?" asked Kira, one of the few students who had bothered to introduce herself to Alex. She belonged to a species that looked like walking trees, her bark-like skin tough enough to stop most projectiles. Her people were known throughout the galaxy as patient defenders capable of standing motionless for days before delivering a single devastating attack. Alex looked up from his notes and smiled. Not exactly jitters, just observing how everyone moves. He gestured toward the feline warriors. They favor their right sides when they leap. See how their left shoulders dip slightly before each jump? And the Bear Clan keeps their weight on their back feet, ready to charge or retreat at any moment. Kira's wooden features shifted into what might have been a frown among her people. "You analyze everything like prey studying predators. That seems backwards for a warrior. Maybe." Alex returned to his notebook. "Or maybe it's exactly what prey needs to do to survive." The conversation stopped as Professor Voren entered the hall. The battle-scarred veteran commanded instant respect from every species present. His own background remained mysterious. Though rumors suggested he was a hybrid of several warrior races, old plasma burns covered half his face, while his remaining eye glowed with artificial enhancement. Students said he had died in combat 7 times and refused to stay dead warriors. His voice boomed across the hall without electronic amplification. "Today marks the beginning of your transformation from dangerous individuals into perfect killing machines. You are here because your species produced nothing finer. You represent millions of years of evolutionary combat perfection." Ripple of pride swept through the assembled predators, claws extended. Fangs gleamed and muscles tensed as each student felt the truth of those words. They were apex predators, the cream of the galactic crop. However, Professor Voren continued, his gaze sweeping across the room, combat perfection means nothing without understanding your enemy's capabilities. This academy exists to teach you about every form of warfare practiced by intelligent species in our galaxy. His artificial eye focused on Alex. Some of you may wonder why certain species are included in this program. Species that lack obvious predatory advantages, natural weapons, or enhanced physical capabilities. The reptilian students hissed quietly, among themselves, while the feline warriors' ears twitched with interest. Even the Bear Clan shifted their massive frames to get a better look at the human, the answer. Professor Voren said, is that the most dangerous enemies are often those you underestimate. Today's assessment will reveal why every species represented here earned their place among the galaxy's elite warriors. Alex noticed something the others missed. Professor Voron's scarred hand rested on a datapad, and his thumb moved slightly each time his gaze fell on a different species group. He was taking notes too, cataloging reactions and responses with the same systematic approach Alex used in his notebook. The assessment chamber doors opened with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a space the size of a small arena. Holographic projectors lined the walls while force field generators hummed with barely contained energy. The floor showed scorch marks from countless training sessions, some recent enough that Alex could smell the ozone. Your first test, Professor Voron announced, will measure your species' natural combat advantages. Each of you will face a series of challenges designed to showcase the abilities that made your people galactic legends. The scenarios will escalate in difficulty until you reach your physical limits. Students began forming lines according to species, with reptilians clustering together while feline warriors maintained their typical loose formation. The bear clan simply stood in a rough group, confident that their turn would come when it came. Alex remained where he was, continuing to write in his notebook while observing the pre-test rituals. Each species had developed elaborate preparation methods. The reptilians performed synchronized movements that looked like a deadly dance, their scales catching the light as they limbered muscles and tested reflexes. The feline warriors groomed themselves with meticulous care, their enhanced senses requiring perfect condition for optimal performance. The bear clan needed no preparation. They simply existed in a state of constant readiness, their massive frames capable of explosive action without warning. Interesting choice, Kira commented as she moved past Alex toward her species' gathering point, studying while others prepare their bodies for battle. Alex looked up from his notes. Bodies are already prepared, he said quietly. Been the same for thousands of years. The interesting part is watching how different species think about combat. And what do you think about combat? Alex closed his notebook and slipped it back into his pocket. I think about everything except combat. Before Kira could ask what he meant, Professor Voron called the first group into the assessment chamber. The reptilian hunters moved forward with predatory grace, their confidence absolute as they entered the arena. Alex settled into a corner seat and reopened his notebook, ready to observe what the galaxy considered perfect predatory evolution. Steam rose from the assessment chamber's floor as cleaning drones removed the last traces of synthetic blood from the previous group's performance. The reptilian hunters had exceeded all expectations, their lightning reflexes and natural weapons, turning the holographic battlefield into a display of pure predatory artistry. Now it was time for the feline warriors to demonstrate why their species dominated 3 entire star systems. The chamber transformed around them, walls shifting to create a maze of shadows and elevated platforms, perfect hunting ground for creatures that had evolved in dense forests and rocky canyons. The first feline warrior, a male with golden fur marked by intricate black patterns, crouched. At the starting position, his enhanced hearing could already detect the subtle hum of holographic projectors charging up, while his nose analyzed air currents that would carry scent information. Begin assessment. Professor Voron's voice echoed through the chamber immediately. The space erupted into chaos. Holographic enemies materialized from every direction, robotic sentinels with plasma cannons, alien soldiers wielding energy blades, flying drones that attacked in coordinated swarms. The feline warrior moved like liquid lightning, his powerful legs propelling him 20 feet straight up to a ceiling perch before the first shots reached his previous position. From above, he surveyed the battlefield with predatory intelligence. His species had perfected the art of vertical combat, using 3-dimensional thinking that gave them massive advantages over ground-bound enemies. A plasma bolt sizzled past his ear, and he twisted in midair, landing on a holographic drone and riding it down while tearing it apart with his claws. The demonstration continued for 3 minutes of non-stop action. The feline warrior flowed between surfaces like gravity meant nothing to him, using the environment itself as a weapon. Shadow became his ally as he appeared and disappeared, striking with surgical precision before vanishing again. Each movement was economical, beautiful, and utterly lethal when the holograms finally stopped. Spawning, the warrior landed in the center of the chamber without breathing hard. His score appeared on the main display. 94% accuracy, average reaction time of 0.3 seconds, 0 damage sustained. The watching students erupted in appreciation. Even rival species had to acknowledge perfection when they saw it. The reptilians hissed approval while the Bear Clan rumbled their respect. Only Alex continued writing in his notebook, apparently more interested in his notes than the spectacular performance. The second feline warrior, the female with distinctive black stripes, stepped forward. Her assessment began in a different environment, an urban battlefield with narrow alleys and vertical surfaces that mimicked her homeworld's canyon cities. The holograms came faster this time, forcing her to maintain constant motion while engaging multiple targets simultaneously. She moved with even greater grace than her predecessor, treating walls and ceilings as natural surfaces. Her silent strike technique allowed her to eliminate enemies before they detected her presence. The way she used sound, or rather, the complete absence of it, turned stealth into an art form that left even veteran observers amazed. Her final score topped the first warrior's performance. 96% accuracy, reaction time of 0.25 seconds, still 0 damage. The feline warriors had established their dominance through displays that combined raw physical ability with sophisticated tactical thinking. Then came the Bear Clan's turn, and everything changed. The chamber reconfigured into an open battlefield with minimal cover, designed to test pure combat power rather than finesse. The first bear warrior, a massive female whose brown fur showed silver streaks of age and experience, simply walked to the center and stood waiting. Her people didn't believe in elaborate preparation rituals or complex positioning strategies. They existed in a state of permanent readiness. Begin assessment. The holograms spawned in greater numbers than before, recognizing that Bear Clan warriors required overwhelming force to present any challenge. Energy bolts hammered into the warrior's position, while blade-wielding enemies charged from all directions. She didn't dodge, didn't seek cover, didn't move at all until the first enemy reached striking distance. Then she exploded into motion. Her massive paw caught a holographic soldier and sent it flying into 3 others, the impact destroying all 4 projections simultaneously. Another enemy leaped at her back and she spun with surprising speed for something so large, catching it in her jaws and crushing the projection instantly. Her bone density allowed her to absorb energy blasts that would cripple other species, while continuing to fight at full capacity. The Bear Clan approach to combat was fundamentally different from what had come before. Instead of avoiding damage, they absorbed it while delivering devastating counterattacks. Their strategy relied on being tougher than anything they fought, outlasting enemies through sheer physical superiority. When her assessment ended, the damage readouts told an impressive story. She had sustained enough punishment to kill most other species 3 times over, yet remained fully functional. Her score reflected this different approach. 88% accuracy, reaction time of 0.5 seconds, massive damage sustained but ignored through natural resilience. Each subsequent bear warrior followed the same pattern, absorbing tremendous punishment while dealing out even more. The chamber's cleaning systems worked overtime, removing synthetic blood and debris from their performances. Though the warriors themselves showed no signs of fatigue or concern, Alex filled several pages with observations about the different combat philosophies on display. The reptilians relied on speed and precision, striking like lightning before enemies could respond. The feline warriors combined mobility with stealth, using environment and shadow as force multipliers. The Bear Clan simply outmuscled their opponents through overwhelming physical superiority. Human, Alex Chen. Professor Voron's voice cut through the chamber. Your turn. The other students leaned forward with interest. They had witnessed 3 distinct approaches to predatory combat, each one representing millions of years of evolutionary refinement. Now they would finally see what made humans worthy of inclusion among galactic elite warriors. Alex closed his notebook and walked toward the starting position. His movements appeared casual, even lazy, compared to the coiled readiness displayed by previous warriors. He carried no weapons, showed no signs of enhanced physical capabilities, and seemed more interested in examining the chamber's wall panels than preparing for combat. "What kind of assessment would you prefer?" Professor Voren asked. "Urban environment, open battlefield, vertical surfaces?" "Whatever's convenient," Alex replied while peering at a holographic projector array. "I'm curious about the refresh rate on these units. How many frames per second do they generate?" The question puzzled everyone present. Refresh rates seemed irrelevant. To combat assessment, though, Alex appeared genuinely interested in the answer. "Standard rate is 60 frames per second, Professor Voren responded, "though I fail to see how that affects your performance." "Probably doesn't." Alex positioned himself at the starting point and opened his notebook to a fresh page. "Ready when you are." The chamber configured itself into a mixed environment with both open spaces and confined areas, designed to test adaptability. Rather than favoring any specific combat style, Alex stood in the center, pencil poised over paper like a student waiting for a lecture to begin. Begin assessment. What happened next defied every expectation the watching students had formed about combat excellence. The first holographic enemies materialized exactly where Alex expected them to appear. He had been watching the projector arrays during previous assessments, noting the subtle energy buildup patterns that preceded each spawn. The robotic sentinels emerged from alcoves on the left side, while aerial drones descended from ceiling positions that matched the power distribution he had observed earlier. Instead of reacting to the attack, Alex simply stepped 3 feet to his right and continued writing in his notebook. A plasma bolt seared the air where he had been standing while he made careful notes about the projectile's trajectory and speed. The watching students leaned forward, in confusion. Surely the human would begin fighting now that combat had started. But Alex showed no intention of engaging the enemies. He walked in a seemingly random pattern around the chamber, pausing occasionally to jot down observations while holographic attacks passed harmlessly around him. His movements appeared casual, even bored, like someone taking a leisurely stroll through a park. A flying drone swooped toward his head with rotary blades spinning. The feline warriors tensed, expecting to see impressive human reflexes or hidden combat abilities. Alex glanced up from his notebook, took 1 step backward, and the drone crashed into a wall where his head would have been. He wrote something down and continued walking. "What is he doing?" hissed one of the reptilian students. "This isn't combat. It's suicide by negligence." The Bear Clan warriors rumbled their confusion. These were the same holograms that had required their full strength and endurance to overcome. Yet the human wandered among them like they didn't exist. Energy blasts traced lethal paths through the air, while Alex calmly noted the recharge cycles between shots. A pack of holographic soldiers charged his position with energy blades raised. Alex looked up briefly, stepped into what appeared to be the most dangerous spot possible, directly between 2 converging enemies, and somehow ended up in the only safe space as the soldiers collided with each other instead of him. He made another note and moved on. "He's predicting their movements," whispered Kira to her neighbor. But how can he predict what hasn't happened yet? The answer became clearer as Alex's assessment continued. He wasn't reacting to attacks. He was anticipating them, based on patterns only. He could see while other species had evolved enhanced reflexes to respond faster to danger, Alex had developed the ability to recognize danger before it fully materialized. Every holographic enemy followed programmed behavior patterns. The aerial drones attacked in swooping curves that brought them close to ceiling-mounted projectors for power transmission. The ground soldiers moved along predetermined paths that avoided obstacles and maintained formation integrity. Even the random elements weren't truly random. They followed algorithmic sequences that repeated every few minutes. Alex had identified these patterns during the previous assessments, while other students watched the spectacular displays of predatory combat. He had been cataloging the underlying systems, that made those displays possible. Now he was exploiting that knowledge to navigate the battlefield with surgical precision. A massive holographic creature materialized directly behind him, arms raised to deliver what should have been a crushing blow. Alex crouched down to write something in his notebook, and the creature's arms passed harmlessly over his head. The timing looked miraculous to observers, but Alex had noticed the power surge in that particular projector array 17 seconds earlier. "Impossible," growled one of the Bear Clan. "No one has reflexes that precise." But reflexes weren't the answer. Alex's reaction times were completely ordinary by galactic standards, probably slower than most species represented in the chamber. What made him untouchable wasn't superhuman speed, but superhuman pattern recognition. While other students had spent their lives perfecting their body's responses to danger, Alex had perfected his mind's ability to eliminate danger before it became dangerous. Professor Voren watched with growing fascination as Alex continued his leisurely stroll through what should have been a deadly battlefield. The human's notebook contained detailed sketches of projector placement, power distribution patterns, and behavioral algorithms that most combat engineers would need. Weeks to reverse engineer. Alex had figured it all out in less than an hour of casual observation. The assessment reached its climax as every holographic system in the chamber activated simultaneously. The space filled with energy blasts, flying drones charging soldiers, and massive creatures attacking from every conceivable angle. Other students held their breath, certain they were about to witness the human's destruction. Alex closed his notebook and put it away, apparently satisfied with his observations. Then he began to move. His path through the chaos looked impossible to everyone watching. He walked between energy blasts with millimeters to spare, stepped over creatures that materialized at his feet, and ducked under attacks that appeared without warning. But to Alex, nothing was without warning. He had mapped every projector's capabilities and timing, turning the chamber into a three-dimensional puzzle with only one safe path through it. The safe path led him in a complex spiral that took him past every enemy spawn point at the exact moment when that projector was cycling to its next sequence. He moved with steady, unhurried steps while destruction raged around him, never accelerating or showing signs of stress. 3 minutes later, every holographic enemy had exhausted its programmed sequence. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of cooling projectors. Alex stood in the center of the arena, completely unharmed, pulling his notebook back out to write down his final observations. His score appeared on the display. 100% survival rate, 0 damage sustained, 0 enemies destroyed. The last number puzzled many students. How could someone achieve perfect scores without fighting? Assessment complete, Professor Voren announced. Alex Chen, please explain your methodology to the class. Alex looked up from his notebook with slight surprise. Methodology? I just paid attention to the patterns. He gestured toward the projector arrays. Each unit has a specific power signature when it's about to spawn enemies. The timing follows standard algorithmic sequences with minor randomization protocols. Once you map the behavior trees, the safe paths become obvious. The silence that followed was deafening. Centuries of predatory evolution, millions of years of combat specialization, and the human had treated the entire exercise like a math problem. You didn't fight, observed one of the feline warriors. You solved. Alex considered this. Fighting would have been inefficient. The enemies weren't real threats, just predictable obstacles. Once you understand the system generating the obstacles, avoiding them becomes trivial. But what about real combat? Demanded a reptilian student. Against actual enemies who don't follow programmed behaviors? Real enemies follow patterns too, Alex replied, opening his notebook to show pages of observations. Biological patterns, tactical patterns, psychological patterns. Everything follows rules, even if the rules are complex. He pointed to sketches of the other students. Your species telegraphs, attacks through micro-movements that precede conscious decision-making. Most predators do the same thing. Their bodies prepare for action before their minds commit to specific actions. Professor Voren stepped forward, his artificial eye glowing brighter. Demonstrate. Without warning, he lunged at Alex with combat veteran speed and precision. His scarred hands moved in a pattern designed to force the human into a defensive reaction that would reveal whatever hidden abilities humans possessed. Alex simply wasn't there when the attack arrived. He had stepped aside before Professor Vorin committed to the lunge, reading the instructor's intention in the subtle shift of weight and muscle tension that preceded action. The professor's hands grasped empty air, while Alex continued making notes about the unsuccessful attack pattern. Fascinating. Professor Vorin straightened his uniform. You're not faster than other species, you're earlier. Being earlier is better than being faster. Alex agreed. Speed helps you react to problems that already exist. Prediction helps you avoid problems before they become problems. The assembled students exchanged glances, their worldview shifting as they processed this revelation. They had spent their lives becoming perfect warriors, honing their bodies and reflexes to respond to any threat with overwhelming force. But Alex represented a completely different approach to conflict, one that made conflict itself optional. This explains much about human military history, Professor Vorin said thoughtfully. Your species has defeated opponents with superior physical capabilities by predicting and controlling the circumstances of engagement rather than becoming better fighters. You became better at choosing when and where to fight. Alex nodded. We're not very impressive in fair fights, so we try to avoid fair fights. What makes a fight unfair? Asked Kira Alex. Smiled and gestured around the chamber. When one side knows something the other side doesn't know. Knowledge makes everything unfair. As the implications sank in, the other students began to understand why humans had earned their place at the academy. Not because they were the galaxy's greatest predators, but because they represented something entirely different, a species that had evolved beyond the need for predation by mastering the art of prediction. The assessment was over, but the real education was just beginning. Silence stretched across the academy's main hall like a heavy blanket. 20 minutes had passed since Alex's assessment ended, and still none of the alien students could make sense of what they had witnessed. The reptilian hunters coiled and uncoiled, their powerful bodies in agitation, their predatory minds struggling to categorize behavior that defied every hunting instinct they possessed. Near the viewing screens, a group of feline warriors replayed Alex's performance in slow motion. Their enhanced eyes tracked his movements frame by frame, searching for hidden techniques or concealed abilities that would explain his impossible success. Their acute hearing picked up whispered conversations from across the hall as other species voiced similar confusion. He moved like prey, one of them muttered, her silver fur rippling with frustration. Prey that somehow knew where every predator would strike before the predator decided to strike. The bear clan had clustered together in their section of the hall, their massive frames creating a wall of brown fur and confused rumbling. They had built their entire civilization on the principle that superior strength and endurance conquered all obstacles. Yet they had just watched a creature with ordinary physical capabilities achieve perfect results through methods they couldn't comprehend. There must be hidden weapons, insisted a young bear warrior whose scars marked him as a veteran despite his age. Some form of technological enhancement that we didn't detect: energy shields, precognitive implants, temporal manipulation devices. But Alex stood before them carrying nothing more threatening than his notebook and mechanical pencil. His clothes were standard academy issue. His behavior remained relaxed and casual, and medical scanners had detected no unusual technology or biological modifications. He appeared to be exactly what he claimed, an ordinary human exchange student who took extensive notes. Professor Vorin stepped onto the central platform, his scarred face grave as he surveyed the assembled students. The veteran instructor had trained warriors from hundreds of species across thousands of combat scenarios, yet even his experience struggled to process what had occurred in the assessment chamber. I see confusion in your eyes, he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had died in combat and lived to teach others how to avoid that mistake. You witnessed something that challenges your fundamental understanding of warfare and survival. You want explanations that fit within your existing knowledge of how combat works. The artificial eye embedded in his skull glowed brighter as he accessed data files, that chronicled military conflicts across the galaxy. Your confusion is understandable because you are thinking like predators. Predators react to stimuli with overwhelming force, speed, and precision. When you see prey behavior, you expect prey results: failure, death, consumption by something higher on the food chain. Alex continued writing in his notebook while Professor Voren spoke, apparently finding the instructor's words worth documenting. The sight of the human calmly taking notes during a lecture about his own performance only deepened the other students' bewilderment. But humans are not prey. Professor Voren continued, nor are they predators in any sense that your species would recognize. They represent something entirely different, an evolutionary path that no other known species has followed. He activated the main display screen, showing star charts that marked the territories of various galactic civilizations. Every species in this room evolved from apex predators on their homeworlds. Your ancestors were the creatures that other creatures feared, the strongest, the fastest, the most perfectly adapted hunters in their respective ecosystems. The display shifted to show biological charts comparing physical capabilities across species. You are the descendants of evolutionary winners, species that conquered their environments through superior combat ability. The reptilian students hissed approval while the feline warriors' tails twitched with pride. Even the bear clan straightened their massive shoulders as they remembered their heritage as the unstoppable force that had dominated Heavy World for millions of years. Humans evolved differently, Professor Voren said, his tone becoming more serious. Their homeworld was populated by creatures that could outrun them, outfight them, and outmuscle them in every category that mattered for traditional predation. Yet humans became the dominant species on Earth through methods that your ancestors would have considered impossible. The display changed to show Earth's ecosystem during humanity's early development. Lions, tigers, bears, and dozens of other apex predators that should have driven early humans to extinction. Instead, the timeline showed human populations growing, while many of these superior predators faced increasing pressure from human expansion. They accomplished this feat through what we now call persistence hunting, Professor Voren explained. While other predators relied on burst speed and overwhelming force to catch prey, humans simply followed their targets until those targets collapsed from exhaustion. It was inefficient, time-consuming, and required no special physical abilities. Beyond endurance, humans were unremarkable hunters. Alex looked up from his notebook, apparently finding this part of the lecture particularly interesting. His species' hunting heritage had shaped their approach to every subsequent challenge, though most humans no longer recognize the connection between ancient persistence hunting and modern problem-solving methods. The key insight, Professor Voren continued, is that persistence hunting required humans to think differently than other predators. Instead of reacting to immediate opportunities, they had to predict long-term patterns. Where would the prey go when exhausted? Which routes would it choose when desperate? How could pursuit be maintained across changing terrain and weather conditions? The implications began to dawn on some of the more thoughtful students. The same mental processes that made humans effective persistence. Hunters would naturally extend to other forms of pattern recognition and prediction humans hadn't developed. Superior reflexes because they had developed something more powerful. Superior anticipation. Over millions of years, this cognitive approach became embedded in human neural architecture. Professor Voren activated a new display, showing brain scans comparing human and alien thought patterns. While your species perfected the ability to process immediate sensory input and respond with optimal physical reactions, humans perfected the ability to process complex information patterns and predict future states. The brain scans revealed stark differences in neural activity. Human brains showed intense activity in regions associated with pattern matching and predictive modeling, while alien brains showed greater development in areas that controlled reflexes and motor responses. Both approaches represented evolutionary optimization, but for completely different survival strategies. In combat assessment, you demonstrated the apex of predatory evolution, Professor Voren said, gesturing toward the alien students. Lightning reflexes, devastating natural weapons, enhanced senses that detect threats the moment they appear. Your performances were magnificent examples of what millions of years of predatory development can achieve. The students preened at this recognition, their pride partially restored by acknowledgement of their impressive abilities. They had indeed performed magnificently, showcasing the very best that galactic predator evolution had produced. Alex demonstrated something entirely different. Professor Voren continued. He showed what happens when evolution optimizes for prediction rather than reaction. While you were responding to threats with perfect efficiency, he was eliminating threats before they could threaten him. Your approach makes you unbeatable fighters. His approach makes fighting unnecessary. The silence that followed this revelation was different from the confused quiet that had filled the hall earlier. This was the silence of minds grappling with concepts that challenged their most basic assumptions about survival and warfare. But, Professor, asked Kira, her bark-like features creased with concentration, if humans can predict enemy actions before they happen, why do they ever lose battles? Why isn't their species ruling the entire galaxy through superior tactical advantage? Professor Voren's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. An excellent question that brings us to the most important lesson of today's assessment. He paused, letting the anticipation build before delivering his final revelation. Humans don't rule the galaxy because they chose not to. Their predictive abilities extend beyond combat tactics to include political and social consequences. They can foresee what would happen if they used their advantages to conquer other species, and they decided they didn't want those consequences. Alex closed his notebook and looked up at his fellow students for the first time since entering the hall. His expression remained calm and friendly, but now the alien student saw something different in his eyes. The same analytical intelligence that had dissected their combat patterns was also evaluating them as individuals, as cultures, as potential allies or threats. That, Professor Voren concluded, may be the most human trait of all, having the power to win and choosing not to use it. Dawn broke crimson over Tyrion VII's jagged horizon, casting long shadows through the Academy's reinforced windows. The storm had finally passed, leaving the air crisp and charged with ozone. Alex stood in the equipment bay, checking atmospheric readings, on a handheld scanner while his fellow students prepared for what Professor Voren had announced as their final examination, live combat assessment. The instructor had declared the previous evening, no holograms, no safety protocols, no simulated environments. Today you face actual threats that can actually kill you. The reptilian hunters performed their traditional pre-battle rituals, scales gleaming as they stretched and tested their reflexes. Their movements created intricate patterns that looked like deadly choreography, each position flowing into the next with predatory grace. Sharp claws extended and retracted in rhythmic sequences that had been perfected over thousands of years of warrior culture. Nearby, the feline warriors groomed themselves with meticulous attention to detail. Their enhanced senses required perfect condition for optimal performance, so they cleaned every whisker and inspected every claw with the dedication of creatures whose lives depended on sensory superiority. They moved in complete silence, their padded feet making no sound even on the metal flooring. The Bear Clan needed no special preparations. They existed in a constant state of combat readiness, their massive bodies capable of explosive violence at any moment. Their thick fur showed new scars from recent training sessions, but the warriors wore these marks with pride. Each scar represented a lesson learned and an enemy defeated. Nervous? Asked Kira as she approached Alex's position. Her bark-like skin had darkened to a deep brown that indicated heightened alertness among her people. Real danger tends to affect organics differently than holographic simulations. Alex glanced up from his scanner readings and smiled. Not nervous exactly, just collecting baseline data about the environment. Temperature, humidity, air pressure, electromagnetic field variations. He showed her the scanner's display. Environmental conditions affect behavior patterns in predictable ways. You're studying the testing chamber before we even see it? I'm studying everything, Alex replied, returning to his readings. The chamber, the equipment, the other students, the instructor. Most importantly, I'm studying the decision-making process that led to this type of final examination. Kira's wooden features shifted into puzzlement. What do you mean? Professor Voron chose live combat for a specific reason, Alex explained while making notes. He could have designed any number of final tests: tactical planning, equipment maintenance, survival scenarios, leadership challenges. Instead, he picked the one assessment type that plays to everyone else's natural advantages while seemingly putting humans at maximum disadvantage. Before Kira could respond, Professor Voron entered the equipment bay. His scarred face was grim as he surveyed the assembled students, and his artificial eye glowed with unusual intensity. The veteran instructor carried a sealed containment unit that hummed with barely restrained energy. Your final assessment will test everything you have learned about combat, tactics, and survival, he announced. Inside this containment unit are 6 void wasps, creatures so dangerous that even experienced military units approach them with extreme caution. Collective intake of breath swept through the room. Void wasps were legendary for their lethality, capable of phasing partially out of normal space-time to avoid attacks while delivering toxin that could kill most species within minutes. They were intelligent pack hunters that coordinated their assaults with frightening precision. The assessment is simple. Professor Voron continued. Eliminate all 6 void wasps while sustaining minimal casualties. Work as individuals or as a team, your choice. You have access to standard combat equipment, environmental controls, and 30 minutes to prepare. The other students immediately began selecting weapons and armor from the equipment racks. Reptilian hunters chose curved blades that complemented their natural claws, while feline warriors selected projectile weapons that would allow them to maintain their mobility advantage. The Bear Clan picked the heaviest armor available. Preparing to absorb whatever punishment the void wasps could deliver, Alex ignored the weapons entirely. Instead, he walked to the environmental control panel and began studying its interface. The system controlled temperature, atmospheric composition, lighting frequency, air circulation, and dozens of other variables that affected the chamber's conditions. Aren't you going to arm yourself? Asked one of the reptilian students, hefting a wicked-looking energy blade. Void wasps can phase through most barriers, but solid weapons can still damage them when they solidify for attacks. Weapons won't help me, Alex replied while examining the control panel's technical specifications. I'm not fast enough or strong enough to fight void wasps directly. My species lacks the physical capabilities for that kind of confrontation. Then how do you plan to survive 30 minutes against the galaxy's most dangerous pack hunters? Alex opened his notebook to a fresh page and began sketching the environmental control system's layout. I don't plan to survive 30 minutes against them. I plan to make them unable to hunt effectively for 30 minutes. There's a difference. The preparation time passed quickly. With most students focusing on physical readiness and tactical coordination, Alex spent the entire period studying the chamber's technical systems and making calculations in his notebook. When Professor Voron called time, the other students had formed into species-based combat groups while Alex stood alone near the environmental controls. The assessment chamber had been configured as a large open space with minimal cover, designed to prevent prey from hiding while giving predators room to maneuver. 6 sealed pods sat in the center of the chamber, each one containing a void wasp in suspended animation. The moment those pods opened, the real test would begin. Final assessment. Professor Voron's voice echoed through the chamber. The pods hissed open and 6 deadly shapes emerged. Void wasps looked like nightmares given physical form. Insectoid bodies the size of large dogs, with wings that blurred between dimensions and stingers that dripped paralytic venom. Their compound eyes tracked every movement in the chamber, while their partially phased bodies made them nearly impossible to target. The first attack came within seconds. A void wasp phased toward the reptilian group, becoming solid just long enough to strike with its stinger before disappearing into dimensional flux. The targeted reptilian warrior's enhanced reflexes saved his life, allowing him to dodge by millimeters while his teammates counterattacked with coordinated blade work. Across the chamber, The feline warriors scattered into three-dimensional combat formation, using walls and ceiling to avoid the pack hunters. Coordinated assault. Their projectile weapons tracked the Void Wasp's brief solidification phases, occasionally scoring hits that drew greenish ichor from the creature's alien anatomy. The Bear Clan formed a defensive circle and weathered the storm of attacks through sheer endurance. Their heavy armor absorbed stinger strikes that would have killed lighter species, while their massive claws caught Void Wasps during materialization sequences. The battle was brutal but effective, with both sides taking significant damage. Meanwhile, Alex had positioned himself at the environmental control panel and begun making rapid adjustments. Temperature dropped by 3 degrees. Atmospheric composition shifted to increase nitrogen content by 2%. Lighting frequency changed from standard white spectrum to a specific blue-green wavelength. Air circulation patterns reversed direction and intensified by 40%. The changes seemed minor, but their effect on the Void Wasps was immediate. The creature's movements became less coordinated as their dimensional phasing abilities struggled to compensate for environmental conditions that fell outside their evolutionary parameters. Their attacks grew clumsy and predictable while their natural camouflage lost effectiveness. Environmental warfare, Alex murmured to himself while continuing to adjust the chamber's systems. Change the battlefield instead of fighting on the battlefield. The Void Wasps had evolved in deep space environments with specific atmospheric and energy conditions. By subtly altering those conditions, Alex was forcing the creatures to expend additional energy, maintaining their exotic abilities. The cumulative effect was like forcing elite athletes to compete at high altitude while breathing through straws. Within 10 minutes, the Void Wasps were showing signs of distress. Their phasing became intermittent, their coordination broke down, and their legendary ferocity diminished to frustrated thrashing. The other students quickly capitalized on these weaknesses, eliminating the creatures with techniques that would have been impossible under normal conditions. When the assessment ended, not a single student had sustained serious injury. The Void Wasps lay motionless on the chamber floor, their exotic biology finally succumbing to environmental conditions their species had never evolved to handle. Assessment complete. Professor Voren announced, "Perfect team performance, 0 casualties, enemy eliminated in under 15 minutes." The other students looked around the chamber with dawning understanding. They had fought magnificently, showcasing all the predatory skills their species had developed over millions of years. But their success had been possible only because Alex had changed the rules of engagement before the fight began. "You turned the environment into a weapon," observed Kira, her respect evident in her voice. "While we prepared to fight the enemy, you prepared to defeat the enemy's advantages." Alex nodded, while making final notes in his ever-present notebook. Void Wasps are apex predators in their natural environment. But this wasn't their natural environment once I finished adjusting it. They became ordinary insects trying to hunt in conditions they couldn't handle. Professor Voren approached the group, his scarred face showing something that might have been satisfaction. "This concludes your combat assessment and your education in the fundamental differences between predator and human approaches to conflict." He gestured toward the environmental controls. While galactic civilization has spent millions of years perfecting the art of fighting, humanity has spent an equivalent period perfecting the art of not needing to fight. The lesson was complete, but its implications would resonate far beyond the Academy. The galaxy's finest predators had learned that the most dangerous opponent might not be the strongest or fastest creature in the room. Instead, it might be the one quietly taking notes while everyone else prepared for battle. Alex closed his notebook and headed toward the exit, already thinking about his next class, environmental engineering for tactical applications. The other students watched him go with a mixture of respect and unease, finally understanding why humans had earned their place among the galaxy's elite warriors. Not because they were better predators, but because they had made predation itself obsolete through the simple act of thinking ahead